shoot up to number 9, because some of the cars, is that right?
Yeah, there's a deputation that might need to be in PX, so we don't want to break for PX and come out. So we'll just carry on with the
carry on
PX
rewardless.
again.
Consideration of offer packs. Hey, Bruce and Angus.
Okay, there's quite a bit of detail in this report, but we'd hope that it's fairly straightforward and pragmatic. Would you like me to give you a bit of a summary? Or okay, the purpose of this report is to have a clear direction and process for selling the residential red zone Port Hills properties. And at the moment, the council's got a couple of inconsistent recommendations. So to background this, after the earthquake, the Crown red zoned some areas. That was a geographic area where they offered to buy people's properties. There were some reasons for that. The land was uninhabitable. There was risk reduction from doing that. To provide for recovery and certainty, urban planning and rebuilding, and social and economic sustainability. Through the global settlement, the council contributed to those purchases and was a partner in that. It's important to note that those purchases were all voluntary. They were not compulsory. There's a bit of a misconception with some people about that. The offers were at 2007 rateable value, which was acknowledged to be generous and above market at the time. And I think that's reflected in the take-up the Crown got. They purchased about 6,000 odd properties in very quick order. There is no legal or statutory link between the vendor that sold to the Crown and the council. So that's a bit of the background. In 2017, the Crown came to the council and said there was about 70 properties they thought could be immediately sold. And the council made a decision to declare those surplus, and at the time constructed a fairly bespoke offer back process around that. Now that decision was premature for a lot of reasons. It was about 4.5, 5 years before we owned the properties. The council hadn't done its own due diligence and investigation in terms of risk and mitigation and that as to whether those properties were suitable for sale. The council then took ownership of those properties in May 21. Now it's important to note that that bespoke offerback obligation, which is the subject of this report, only related to those 70 properties. Since then, the council considered in the 23-24 plan a list of residential Port Hills properties that could be sold, and then again in the long-term plan 24-34, and declared some surplus. In the annual plan resolution, they rescinded all previous resolutions related to those properties. So we have cracked on and been selling and have properties on the market that some were subject to that bespoke resolution, but they've all been sold in accordance with council's normal policies and practices, which is in an open, transparent and public manner and widely available to the public. The issue we have at the moment is the LTP decision you've just made, which has a handful of properties in it, some subject to the 2017 resolution and some not. And we as staff don't have clear direction going forward on how to deal with that. Applying the resolutions that exist at the moment would create inconsistencies. So we're suggesting that is easily fixed by revoking the 2017 resolution, and we carry on selling all properties in an open, transparent and public manner.
Just add one piece to that. Some of the properties from the 2024 decision from the LTP, it is impractical to apply the 2017 resolution because we will be, to address the issue of reducing risk and hazard, we will be reconfiguring those properties, and the previous titles that we acquired will cease to exist. So it's impractical to do that in a strict interpretation. We'd have to try and work our way around it to find a way to make that work if the 2017 remained.
So we've provided a real live example that we're planning to implement in Sea Ridge Lane in the report. So, there's 6 owners there that would have sold to the Crown, and there'll only be 5 titles left to sell, which will not be in the same configuration as the original titles. So there's a bit of detail in this, a little bit of complexity, but we think it's an easy fix.
But it's tidying up a bit of...
Well, it's to provide consistency.
Yep,
So,
excellent.
yeah.
Okay, so question, Sarah.
Thanks so much. Listen, I understand the rationale for bringing this back and changing that. I don't have a specific issue with that, but I still think we do need to find a way, not necessarily to do a formal offer back and find the original owners, that kind of stuff, but to be able to prioritise within an open and transparent system for previous owners of those properties or adjacent landowners. We've done that in the past as a council, so along the Old Pawaho with the flood buyouts that we did, we prioritised neighbouring properties because we knew that, for example, some of them couldn't be built on, and therefore we wanted people who were going to look after them better, those kind of things. So, and another one with a garage lease recently. So how do we do that?
Well, firstly, in terms of the flood intervention properties along the Heathcote River, we did not prioritise those. They were put on the open market and sold on the open market. Some just landed up being sold to adjoining owners and some didn't. The garage in Main Road was a very bespoke and specific situation, and we had competing interests for that. So we decided to run a process where we said we would give preferential treatment to needs. So we got proposals and we evaluated those not only on price, but whether the person offering to buy it had better needs than another one.
Yeah, and that's probably what I'm getting at. So there'll be properties, especially on the Port Hills, those who know the hills, access issues and a whole pile of things are made easier or more difficult by neighbouring properties. We know that some of those are linked to some of these properties. And is there a way for us to prioritise, for example, sales to people who have access issues that would be made easier by having the adjoining, that kind of thing? You'd still need market price, those kind of things.
It would be very difficult to maintain a market sale but give preferential treatment to someone. But look, there's only one property I'm aware of that suits or is an example of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that is in 1 Kinsey Terrace, and and the person, the adjoining neighbour, came to the LTP and put in a submission that they would like to buy that property to resolve access issues. Our intention would not be to put that property on the market, but bring back a separate report to council to deal with that issue, because that is complex in itself.
Okay.
So we, like 1 Kinsey, we will definitely be bringing back a report rather than putting it on the market.
So if there are other properties that pop up during, over time, where it makes sense to do a specific sale rather than the normal open market tender process, you would just bring that back as a separate decision if that got raised?
Yes, and we would anyway, because it would be a departure from policy.
That's
because
right.
We'd be dealing unilaterally and only council can make that decision.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. So, Mark. Yeah, Mark is happy to move it and Tim is happy to second it. So we've got any debate that we want to play with? Yep.
Just briefly, I just want to draw people's attention to that original resolution. We can't quite see right now because the original resolution had a series of properties up for sale, and we removed 2 of them, number 1 and 220 Nayland Street. And I just want to point out that those 2 sections are about to open as the city's latest skate park and village green in a couple of weeks' time. And that's why we saved them from that sale process originally. Thanks.
Okay, Yanni, please.
Thanks. You know, as a councillor who represented this area during the earthquakes, you know, I think it is with a degree of sadness that we don't have a process to go back to the people that had to sell. And I know people can say, oh, it was voluntary, but actually thinking back to that time, there were huge hazard risks. There were a whole bunch of planning decisions that were made that were very difficult for people to comprehend. And a lot of people obviously did make the decision to sell to the Crown. But I think there should be a recognition that we should have a duty to go back to those people that were there, because they had, you know, their whole lives were invested in these communities, and it was pretty traumatic having to leave. Also, the thing that strikes me is that this, in contrast to the Avon River corridor, there doesn't seem to be any sort of high-level planning around this, and that's what I do find quite odd, that we're going to market selling off bits of property without any sort of understanding of what the overall strategy is for the city, for this, for the Port Hills Red Zone. So, yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to accept this today, but I do think clarifying the process is important, and maybe with the comments that Councillor Templeton has made, staff can give some thought to what we may be able to do differently. But I'm also just struck by the deputations we had around some people not comprehending, or sorry, some people questioning if we've really done the adequate risk assessment for some of these sites as we put them on the open market and sell them back. And I hope people can visually recall the graphics that we were presented with, the photos of being close to the cliffs. As the council that represented this area in the earthquakes and saw firsthand the impact of things like the cliff collapse, it was pretty horrific. So I would hate to put other people into that area of harm going forward, and hope that we've really got a good understanding of those risks, so that we don't just repeat mistakes of the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a mover and seconder. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Angus and Bruce. So we've got Gavin, please.